everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do another quarterly wrap up. You guys really enjoyed this format last time, so I'm going to try and keep it going the whole year. I am definitely reading less books this year than I have in the past, so monthly wrap ups just haven't really felt like something that's been worth filming, especially because some months I've only been reading a couple of books. So this quarterly wrap up is going to cover, what did I do last time? January, February, March. This is going to cover April, May and June of 2026. And whilst I haven't read tons and tons of books these past 3 months, I think I probably read more in the first 3 months of the year, I have found some absolute corkers. Before we dive into the books, make sure you have subscribed if you're not already. If you're new here, hi, I'm Becca. I talk about romantasy books every week for you guys. And let me know what your favourite read of April, May and June has been in the comments below. So first up in April, I remember I needed something at the time that was just so new, like something I was just driven to read by mood, and I ended up going for Kresley Cole's A Hunger Like No Other. This was really good. This is a series that I think was originally published in the early 2000s, although it is getting some new covers at the moment. And I think that's because Kresley Cole has a new book coming out, I think in August, called Ravenous. This is your classic urban paranormal romantasy. It's super spicy. It has a wolf shifter who speaks in Scots. I really want to dive into the rest of this world. It is huge. I think there's like 21 books in this series or maybe more, and they do all interconnect, but from my knowledge, I think they're all standalones. This one definitely wasn't too deep of a read. I can't really say this had like fantastic plotting, incredible world building, but it was fast paced, it was a high action, it was an easy read, it was spicy, it had romance at its heart, and this was exactly what I needed at the time when I was in a huge reading slump, which I have been in like the whole of 2026. This was something I could grab, and I think I'm going to save the rest of the series for that moment that I just need something that I can just like drive through. And I really like the new covers of these. I definitely want to read the rest of them. I don't know why I haven't picked up the second one yet. I think maybe I'm saving it for that time. I just need something that I know is going to be quick, easy and spicy. But this was fine. In fact, you know, I would say this was pretty good. This one I'm going to give a 3.5 stars. I think at the time I gave it 4 stars just because it was what I needed in the moment. But I think after further reflection, probably a 3.5, but that is not a bad rating by any stretch of the imagination. This just isn't something I would classify as a 4 or 5 star read for me personally. If I was rating purely on just like good times and vibes, sure, it's a 4. Let's give it a 4. Up next, I read a book that has been on my TBR for a long time, and it's actually been on it that long that the book has since been picked up for traditional publishing and almost had re-released. The book is Riftborn by Greenwich and Lennox. This was a fantastic romantasy option for the month of May. April, the month was April. We're not on to May yet, sorry, this was April. I don't know what took me so long to pick this up, but part of me is glad I waited, especially because when I finished this, I distinctly remember being like, I need book 2 Duskbound immediately, and I had the indie copy of Duskbound on my shelf, but I was chatting to one of the authors and they did say that there's a couple of text changes between the original indie books and then the new traditionally published ones, so they kind of recommended that I waited for Duskbound to come out or wait to get my hands on an arc of Duskbound. I remember sitting there like, do I just dive into the indie? Do I just do it? Because this was left in such a place. I was desperate for the next one, but I've been good. I followed their advice. I've waited to get my hands on like a traditionally published copy of the text. I actually just yesterday, at the time I'm filming this, received a proof copy of Duskbound, so I'm going to be diving into this one as soon as possible. But Riftborn was really, really great. I have a feeling this fantasy series has a long way to go. I think I gave this one 4.5 stars. It was really enjoyable. There were parts of this that felt a little familiar or a little guessable, I guess, but I read a lot within the romantasy genre, so I do genuinely struggle to find something that doesn't feel similar to other things. This definitely was not the worst culprit of that, but it felt a little bit guessable. Like there was parts of it I was like, oh, I bet this happens, and then it did. However, I'm taking that with a pinch of salt because from what I've heard about this series, the books just get better and better. I know lots of people rave about The Ascended, which is the spin-off of this series. Again, I had that one in indie and I've got that one traditionally published on pre-order. So this one had a 4.5 stars from me in April, but I do think this is going to be bigger in book 2 and I'm very excited to dive into it. Next up, I did a reread of one of my favourite books of 2025, and that is Silver Elite. Now, I know what you're thinking, Becca, why have you done a reread? Well, that is because Broken Dove was on the horizon, so I read these back to back. Silver Elite was just as good as I remember. If actually, I think the second time round I actually enjoyed this more. When I read this the first time round, I read it around the same time I read To Cage a Wild Bird, which I love. That might be my favourite dystopian that's come out over the past few years. So actually reading this again at a time where I hadn't picked up lots of dystopian in a while reminded me how much I loved this book. But book 2, oh my god, this ended up actually being my book of the month for April. This is easily a case of where book 1 was great, but book 2 is somehow better. I love the way the story went. I am spinning with theories for this one. I can't wait to see what happens in book 3. Some of the characters that I love from book 1 that I would like to spend more time with, I got to do that in book 2. I think just generally the way that this world continued to surprise and just excite me was fantastically done. I don't know why I loved it more than I was expecting to. I gave book 1 5 stars, so I was expecting to really enjoy this, but somehow it exceeded all of my super high expectations anyway. I really can't talk too much about why I love this one so much without spoiling it, especially because it's book 2 in a series. So if you haven't picked up the Silver Elite series yet, you're just gonna have to trust me on this one. Please do. But I guess in a nutshell, it had like higher stakes, more action, new characters, a fantastic found family trope actually in this one, which I adored, some sizzling unexpected romances. One of the things I loved as well in this, which if you have read this, you will maybe get where I'm coming from, the whole thing with the cake, with the chocolate cake, let me know. Leave a cake emoji in the comments if you know what I'm on about. I love dystopian, it feels poignant, and I think especially this kind of more dystopian romance that we're getting fits really into the genre of things I enjoy. It's high paced, it's high action, super entertaining, super addictive, and I just think this is such a good example of what makes this genre so fantastic. In April, I was traveling to go to a Polycon, so I did actually manage to get a ton of reading done. However, I did listen to one final book, and that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I started listening to this with my husband, I want to say back in January, and because it's quite a long audiobook, I have just been slowly consuming it whenever I have had chance. But I did manage to finish it up in April. There was a bit of an extra push on me because I wanted to finish it before I went to go watch the film at the cinema, and I really liked this. This is a bit of an unusual pick for me. I don't read tons of sci-fi unless it's kind of in that dystopian fantasy or speculative fiction space. But this one was quite a refreshing experience. I really enjoyed the film, The Martian by Andy Weir, but I haven't read the original book. I haven't read any of his other works before. And I thought this was pretty accessible sci-fi. As somebody who's not a massive reader within that genre, like I understood all of it, whilst it still remained quite scientific and technical. I think it was written in a way that was very approachable for somebody that wasn't super into the very high-tech sci-fi stuff. And the film was fantastic. Really controversial opinion, I think I enjoyed the film a bit more. I think some of the parts that felt slower in the book, and this was a really long audiobook actually, some of those bits that felt slower in the audiobook I didn't feel were as slow in the film. I don't know, I actually preferred the film on this occasion. Nonetheless, this was still a fantastic read. I rate this really highly. Moving on to May, I actually had a fantastic reading month in May. I think it was one of the most books I've read in a month, kind of months this year. But also I pretty much enjoyed everything that I picked up that month, as well as finding some new favourites. So first up, I'm one of those books that is definitely solidly classified as a new favourite. This is The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Antonia Hodgson at her Lincoln Waterstones tour event for this book. Why have I put off reading this? I mean, on the surface, it looks like everything that I would love. It had that kind of academic angle, had those deadly trials and competitions, had romance within there, had this really delicious, well-built kind of monastery system. I adored this. This is possibly one of the easiest 5 stars I have ever given. And I'm very excited about 2, which I know book 2 has recently had its title announced. I think it's called A Fox in Winter. I love the dynamic between, I mean, there's lots of kind of main characters in this, but certainly between Nima, and then I can never remember his name, the guy that is the fox candidate. I love the mystery. The author actually writes kind of historical crime as well, and I feel like some of that murder mystery, whodunit, was interwoven into the plot, which made for a really, really interesting read. The depth of the world building, the mystery around the magic in this world, the subtleties, the kind of elements of not even necessarily prophecy, but just like rules and politics and the way that the world works. I just had a fantastic time. If you haven't read The Raven Scholar and you've been looking for like a nicely written, well-built, addictive, like just something I think you're gonna have a great experience with no matter what kind of fantasy you like, I think this is the one to go to. This was phenomenal. I was also really lucky in May to interview one of my all-time favourite authors, Helen Scheurer. That was at her London event for her UK tour for The Shadow Prince. Obviously, I gave this book a reread in preparation for that talk. If you're new here, or maybe if you're not new here but you just didn't know, I really enjoy Helen Scheurer's writing, particularly the Legends and Ashes of Thesmar series. This is a standalone set in the Legends of Thesmar, which is my favourite of the 2. I actually have a whole video on my recommended reading order for this series and like where this book fits in. That's on my channel if you want to go and have a look and yap with me for like 45 minutes about Helen Scheurer. But this has been traditionally published. So when I first read this book, it was originally titled Slaying the Shadow Prince. This follows two characters that are really instrumental in kind of the wider plot, the wider chaos in the world, the wider world building and the conflict. But other than that, it's also fantastic standalone fantasy romance. You could technically read this one first if you wanted. I think chronologically this sits first, so you could actually dive in just to see if you like this author's writing style, if you enjoy the world, if you want more from this. I didn't really notice any major differences between the indie text and the new text, but obviously I'm happy that this has been picked up for traditional publishing and is available with the rest of the series, which is coming out later this year. I had a great time rereading this. This has become one of my comfort worlds somehow, despite how dark and gritty and terrifying it is. Any more time that I get to spend with Helen Shoyura is always a fantastic time. I mean, no shocker, I gave this 5 stars, but I have read this before and given it 5 stars before. It was really great to refresh my memory though, because it had been, I think, a year since I'd read this. So mainly, I put this on my May TBR so I could be fully refreshed for interviewing Helen, but also it was really great to dive back into this world. And this is genuinely such a fantastic romantasy standalone, and I don't feel like we get a lot of standalones, so definitely give this one a go. Next up, I finally did it, guys. I finally read Daggermouth. This is just as good as everybody's saying it is. I devoured this. I will say this is a little darker than I was expecting. Like, in my brain it was slightly dark, but definitely go into this with the expectations that there is like a dark fantasy or dark romance element to this as well. So much happens in this book. There is so much action, so much passion of every kind, so much violence, and just like it's fast paced, it's high action, it's high stakes. The romance was delicious. Like, this enemies to lovers, like mortal enemies, would kill each other, do kill each other. Also, like, just sometimes when they're arguing and one of them tries to blow the other's kneecap off, like, give me more kneecaps being blown off in romance, please. This is where I get a flag for people being concerned for my mental state. Look, the book, fictionally only, please. Kneecaps, fictional kneecaps is what I'm on about here. This is the indie copy, so if you're looking for this book, the traditionally published cover looks slightly different, but oh my god, this was so juicy. You're probably going to see off the back of what I read for the rest of this month, this actually set the tone for what I read moving forward for the rest of May. I am desperate. I think book 2 is called Python. We have had an announcement, but I don't know off the top of my head when it's coming out, but I will be pre-ordering that baby. Loved the characters, loved the dynamic of pretty much every relationship. Like, loved the relationship, for example, between our main character Shadira and the male main character's sister. Obviously the romance between the main two. It's a bit of a romance between Shadira and a previous love interest. Like, just every, oh my god, also between, I completely forgot, his sister and his friend who's running that. Look, just trust me. You're looking for something high paced, full of action. That seems to be the theme. I think the books I'm gravitating towards at the minute, because I am a bit slumpy, are the ones that are like getting my heart pounding. This definitely did that. I then fell into a K.M. Moronova Dark Forces hole that I could not get out of. The first book in this series, and I would recommend reading them in order, Leave Me Behind, I want to say I read about a year ago before it was picked up for traditional publishing. And then since that got picked up, I think November, December and April, we've had new releases within this world, and I think there is more to come. I completely forgot about this world, and it's one of my favourite dark romance series, so I don't really know how I had done that, but I had only read Leave Me Behind. But I was talking about the first book and how good it was, and I had just read Daggermouth, and I looked at these and I went, how have I not read you yet? Actually, I do need to dive into these immediately. My favourite of the whole series actually is easily the little duo, Your Knife, My Heart, My Blade, Your Back. This was all kinds of crazy. This is a darker romance, as I said, so definitely check the trigger warnings if you're going to go into this one. But so chaotic, and again, same words I've used for a lot of these books, high action, high pace. Like, this was really easy to read. Super spicy, these ones as well. Why did I like this one more than the others? Good question. I think I enjoyed the setting of like this underground training ring to get into the Dark Forces in the first place, and the threat that came with that. I don't know why. I think because I love these kind of Divergent-esque, you know, like when we see Triss fighting to be dauntless, like that kind of vibe. That's kind of what I got from this, down to like a Miles Teller type character as well. But also the romance in this one, I did really love both of our main characters. I think their stories were both very compelling and I loved them together. Also, this broke my heart a few times throughout the process as well. The series is really great, but I would recommend starting with Leave Me Behind before diving into this duet. And then the last one so far in the series, Bulletproof, I did enjoy. This one is a small town dark military romance. So him and his squad are in disguise. How do I say this? In disguise. What are they? They are in disguise, but they're undercover. They are undercover, disguised as, it makes them sound like they're like mimes coming out. Anyway, they're undercover as like a motorcycle mechanic group, but they are actually Dark Forces looking to find kind of a link to this underground network of criminals in this small town. I will say I read about 80% of this and was like, Okay, I'm enjoying it, but I don't quite see the female main character as compelling as I have in the other ones, which is why this was probably my least favourite in the set. However, the last 5 to 10% did change that, but I don't think it was enough to make me be invested as much in the female character as I had been in the other books of the series, so that's why this was my least favourite, but I still did enjoy this, and I still read it really quickly, and it was very clearly what I needed at the time. And last but not least, this feels like a full pivot. I read An Archive of Romance by Ava Reid. This one was a very quick read. This isn't really its own story. It is a companion novel of like various pieces of artwork, kind of excerpts of like newspaper clippings and interviews and like things that inform the story. So I did read this whole thing cover to cover, and I don't know if I would ever do that again. It's a really nice thing for me to have as a huge Study in Drowning fan. It's one of my favourite books of all time, and this was really nice to have some of that background context into our two main characters, but also specifically into Emrys Miraithan and Ankarad. And then also a little bit of Preston and Effie's wedding. Like, this was just a really nice companion. It's definitely not a standalone story or anything that I would usually sit down and read cover to cover. But now I've done it once, I'm very happy with the extra knowledge I've gained and context I've gained through this. I probably will not read this again. But it is a nice thing to have on my shelf, and it also has like lots of beautiful artwork in it as well. Next up we have the month of June, and I only actually read 4 books in the month of June. But I did find a new favourite and my new book of the year. The first book I actually read in June was a reread. That was a reread, and I did this via audiobook. I did part 1 and part 2 of the graphic audios, Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry. I listened to this or reread this specifically in preparation for diving into book 2, which, spoiler alert, that will be my next quarterly wrap up, but I have actually just finished reading that. I'm filming this very early July, so I have just finished reading that, and that was phenomenal, but we'll talk more about that in the next wrap up. So I read this primarily just to refresh my memory. This was one of my favourite books of 2025, and I think I enjoyed this actually more on the second go through. Knowing what I know about the end of this book and certain revelations, it was really interesting to reread this and see all of the like Easter eggs and clues that we get throughout the text about like what's going to happen and like people's real identities and things like that. Like, it was just really interesting to reread this book having read it in preparation for book 2. And I have to say the graphic audios were really, really well done. I enjoyed the narration. I love a graphic audio. It's my favourite way to listen to audiobooks. So if anything ever has a graphic audio, I am 10 times more likely to want to buy that. But I definitely listen and take in audiobooks a lot slower than I can actually physically read the text. So it took me a while to get through that. But in the month of June, I've also been doing a lot of gaming, some other hobbies. I've also been very, very busy with work. My apprenticeship just finished, for example. I've had a number of exams. So I just haven't really been in the headspace for like putting my eyes to paper and reading, so actually being able to game whilst listening to the audiobook has been really fantastic. Yeah, 6 stars. This is one of my god tier romantasy reads. I recommend it to everybody, but particularly if, like me, you like, there's something about the monsters in this. It's just so unique. This doesn't really feel like any other romantasy that's around at the moment. I often hear the criticism that romantasy can feel a bit similar. I didn't get that with this at all. This feels so standalone and unique to everything else out there. I love the threat of the monsters and this like mysterious sickness. I love the world. I love how big the world was. I love the political elements in this. Just all in all, 10 out of 10, 12 out of 10, 6-star god tier read. Had a great time with it the second time around as well. My feelings haven't changed. If anything, they've got better. As I said, my brain was a bit all over the place in June, so I actually fell back onto a bit of a comfort series for me that I hadn't finished, and that was book 5 and 6 in the Sparrow Fall series by Catherine Cowles. I do have these books physically, and I did actually read them in physical format, but I've actually started packing. I'm moving later this year, and this is one of the series that has been packed. But I read Chasing Shelter. This is actually one of my favourites of the whole series. I think my favourites, my top 2 are probably books 2 and book 4. But this one I rated really highly. Had a good time with both of the books in this world. Read them very quickly. Clearly was what my brain wanted. If you haven't seen the series before, it is a small town romantic suspense. So it has that kind of cozy, romance-centric, everybody knows everybody, but it has an element of mystery and thrill and suspense that I think really drives that story forward and adds in that action that clearly I've been craving the past few months. But I also find these really easy to read. They're very entertaining, they're very addictive because of that suspense, I think, and because of that romance, and I just want to pick the next one up immediately. This series is now finished, so I'm going to have to find more Catherine Cowles to read for all the times when my brain is not working. Similarly, I also read Secret Haven, which is the final book in the series. series. This one I enjoyed. I probably didn't enjoy this one as much as I thought I was going to. I have a few friends I've read this series that have said this is actually their favourite of the whole bunch. Definitely wasn't my favourite of the whole bunch, but was good. Did enjoy it. I've been waiting for this character's stories, like their stories, for a long time, so actually it was quite nice to get closure to this world, but I definitely preferred Chasing Shelter of the two, I think. And then last but not least, and certainly not least, because I can't explain to you the level of obsessed I am with this book, please expect this to become my entire personality trait. I'm going to become a pirate, I think, at this point. The book is Steelborn by Taylor J. LaRue. This was my final book for June. How do I quantify my love for this? This is now my book of the year. So previously my kind of top ranking book was probably going to be Starside by Alex Astor. This has, I'm so sorry Alex, this has overtaken that. Starside was so fantastic. Steelborn, holy moly. I did accidentally give off the impression on the internet that this was Kraken smut. It's not Kraken smut. I said I need more Kraken fantasy in my life. By Kraken fantasy I mean that like there is a Kraken in the sea that they must slay. Like it is a big element of the plot. It is a mythical creature that exists. Really liked that element. I did unfortunately give the impression that this is smut with a Kraken. I have recommendations if you want those recommendations, but that is not what this is, and me and the author ended up hilariously just exchanging Kraken smut recommendations in DMs. But this is not that. If you're a fan of Throne of Glass or any kind of fantasy with those assassin-y type main characters, I think you'll love this. If you like a woman who is unabashed, she's happy to go after what she wants, I think you'll like this. If you like danger and threat and mystery and bargains and betrayals, this is going to be the book for you. If you like an enemies to lovers romance, there is a slow burn, but at any point they would be willing to rip each other's clothes off if they could just get past how much they despise each other. This is the one for you. I just needed this. I don't know what it was in this that I needed, but there is something about the ingredients of this book that just hit so hard within that part of my body that loves reading, and this gave me everything. Hey, if you told me I blacked out and wrote this book as everything I love about romantasy, I would probably believe you. I could be Taylor J. LaRue. I'm pretty sure she's a very pretty blonde lady, but it could be me based on how much this book tickled my brain. You guessed it. It's high action, it's high stakes, but there's just something so special about this. I'm really excited for more people to read this. It comes out in August. If you haven't already got it pre-ordered, there's a really beautiful Waterstones edition, and I've seen some special editions in the US and Canada as well, I think. And also every pre-order, they're actually donating a proceeds of the funds to a very important charity helping children to read. So if you want to know more about that, it is on the author's Instagram page, a bit of a description of who that charity is and what they do. I don't think anything's going to beat Steelborn, but then again, I didn't think anything was going to beat Starside. I don't know. I think this tickles my brain in such a personal way that is so indicative of everything that I love. I genuinely can't see anything beating this. This has made it immediately onto my all-time favourites. Like, this is up there with Throne of Glass for me. This was, yeah, phenomenal. I loved her. So that is everything I read this quarter. So that covers April, May and June of 2026. As I said, I'm definitely reading a lot less this year. I've actually made the decision to scrap my reading goal. I don't need reminding every single day when I open Goodreads that I'm 15 books behind my goal. A goal that is made up, that I made up for myself just based on what I read last year. So I've actually decided my Goodreads goal is 1. I've met my Goodreads goal for the year. And that has kind of loosened the pressure off me, and I've already found myself gravitating more towards just wanting to read anything. I think when I get behind on my goal, I start to prioritise like shorter books or things that I know that are quick, and it's just not necessarily what I actually want to be reading right in that second. I'm a big mood reader and I'm trying to embrace that a bit more. So I always think, hey, I'm a mood reader, you know, whatever genre tickles my fancy is what I'm going to pick up. But also I'm trying to look at it as, I might read 300 books this year. I might read 30. It depends what mood I'm in. Mood reading goes beyond like which book you pick up next, and that's very much the space I'm in. I have already read some fantastic books in July. I'm really looking forward to my next quarterly wrap up already. But that is it for me today. Don't forget to leave me a comment down below with your favourite book that you've read over April, May and June this year. And if you've made it to the end of this video, also leave a cake emoji. Let's just fill the comments with loads of cake. But other than that, I will see you in the next one.